Do you want to attain long-term success in your business journey? Discover the key strategies and actions that will help you achieve sustainable growth and prosperity. Learn from my guest, Scott Ritzheimer, as he provides insights into navigating the stages of entrepreneurial growth to reach lasting achievement.
Welcome to Biz Help For You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Scott, an accomplished entrepreneur, played a pivotal role in launching almost 20,000 new businesses and nonprofits, achieving remarkable success alongside his business partner as they steered their multi-million-dollar business through a decade of sustained double-digit growth, all before he reached the age of 35. His entrepreneurial journey led him to establish Scale Architects, a venture dedicated to assisting founders and CEOs in pinpointing and executing the critical strategy required to fast-track their businesses to predictable success. You can benefit from Scott's wealth of experience by tapping into his expertise in rapid business growth and strategic implementation, helping you achieve your own entrepreneurial goals and navigate the path to success more effectively. So, Scott, welcome to the show.
Candy, I'm so excited about this conversation. Very excited to be here. Podcast actually changed my life, both the course and trajectory of my own personal life and my business. So getting the opportunity to come on, talk with a wonderful host like yourself, and share a little bit of my story is always very exciting.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you're here. But before I get into questions that I have for you on the topic today, I would love for you just to tell us a little bit more of your story on how you became an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's a little funny. I fancy myself an accidental entrepreneur. I really didn't do it on purpose. So what had happened was I was in ministry at the time and was looking for a part-time job to kind of pay the bills. You know, it's got to make ends meet some way, shape, or form. And I met someone local to me who had a small business and was looking for someone to answer support emails and do tech support. So I was like, sure, I can figure it out. And so I started there part-time. And within a few months of working there, he actually sold the company. He owner financed it and sold it to a group out of Nashville. And kind of very long story short, about 18 months and for me, 3 stomach ulcers later, the company was systematically but unintentionally destroyed. There were no bad guys in the story. You know, it's not one of those, there's a villain and everyone was trying to do the right thing and everybody kind of did the wrong thing in some way, shape, or form. And what was a vibrant company doing a few $1 million a year with 13 employees became an insolvent company with 2.5 people working from home. And I was there just kind of watching it both from the sidelines and in the game all at the same time, and learned more in that 1.5 years than I did when I went back to business school about 5 years later. It was one of those experiences, you probably had one where it's like you'd never ask for it, right? You don't really want to have an experience like that, but the lessons you learn from it, you wouldn't trade for the world. And so what happened, to answer your question directly, this is all leading up to September 2008, not a great time to start a business, by the way. The original founder, the company who had made the acquisition, called him and said, hey, we've done everything that we know how to do. We're going to declare bankruptcy. If you want the company's assets, you can take it over and it's yours. Just come and get it, basically. So he got a U-Haul and was on his route to Nashville from Atlanta. And he called me up and said, hey, I'm getting the company back. I know you've worked here. Talk to them. They said, it'd be okay to contact you. Will you come on and help me launch it? And so I came on as a co-founder in the relaunch, if you will, of the company. And again, this is September 2008. So the first 6 months, the stock market goes down 30%, and we're winging a prayer. You know, there's not anything more than that. Just trying to make the whole thing work from his basement. And, you know, we got a couple other things in the right place, and we muscled a couple of other things through. And very long story short, I had the opportunity of, running that business with him, we helped around 1,000, closer to 2,000 organizations every single year to get started and to scale up. And that was my entrepreneurial journey. All happened in my 20s, early 30s. It was absolutely crazy. I had no business doing it, but somehow some of it worked at least.
Right. Well, I think what you touch on there too is we go in sometimes as accidental entrepreneurs. I didn't intend to be an entrepreneur either. And so we don't always know everything we need to know. And so there was unfortunately a sad part of the story where things just went opposite of what people thought was going to happen. But thankfully, it was able to be turned around over time. But I think that just shows us that we really need to find out what we don't know so we can still be successful, which is why I have this podcast too, because I want to interview people that can share tips and tricks and strategies that people can learn from so they don't have to make those mistakes. So I appreciate you being here to talk about that. But I know today we're going to talk about what you call the founder's evolution. And I would love for you to, first of all, explain what is that and why is it significant?
Yeah, when you see the founder's story happen this many times, this is businesses, nonprofits, just at scale. That's one thing. When you find yourself right in the middle of the same story you've watched unfold thousands of times, that's another thing, right? And having the opportunity, especially early in my career, to see it happen at scale, to see it happen in my own life, I started to realize that all of these different stories really came down to one story. There was this one pattern that every successful entrepreneur followed. Again, businesses, nonprofits, didn't matter. And there was, and those that didn't make it, because you start a lot of organizations, you see a lot of them not make it. That's the unfortunate side of that stage for an organization and for a founder. And the ones that didn't make it, or those that stalled out after having some success, those that bumped up against a wall and just couldn't get through, it was because they didn't understand the pattern. They didn't understand how it changed over time. And so what I did after I had my company, sold it, and having a little bit more time on my hands, I went through and just kind of codified what's going on in this process, right? Like are there stages? Are there clear points where stages change? And I discovered something as I was working with founders, especially around this idea of how do we need to show up and how does it change over time? I realized something about the founder's journey that's not true of virtually any other journey. And that is, for founders, their stage change, their role changes, their what causes success changes over time, which is true of every leadership journey. But for founders, there's no clear demarcation point that the game has changed. So you take an employee's leadership journey, for example, and you start off like I did on the front line. You're a frontline worker, and if you do a good job and show some potential, they promote you to being maybe a line supervisor. And for a lot of folks, that's actually a pretty hard transition to make, right? Moving from being the one doing the stuff to having to lead other people to do stuff, that's a different skill set. But it makes sense because it came with a new title, it came with a promotion, it came, there are external validators that say, hey, the stage has changed for you and you need to change the way you show up to succeed. Well, for a founder, the same progression is happening, but I mean, this, you are founder and CEO on your business card from before you start your business, right? So I'm going to start a business. So what's the first thing you do? You find a name, you get the name. The next thing you do is you go get your business cards and they say founder and CEO. But the reality of it is there are 5 distinct shifts that are going to happen before you ever actually step into a true CEO seat. And because there's nothing to really say that the game has changed, what you see is up to that point, especially founders, they get stuck doing the wrong things in the wrong stages. And this is a very long answer to your question, sorry, but last point I'll make is what I did was I used my experience personally. I used the experience of all these thousands of founders that I got to walk alongside, and I mapped out the 7 stages of the journey that every single founder must face.
Do you want to quickly mention maybe what those stages are, just to kind of get us
Yeah.
as a guide?
So yeah, let's set this up and we'll go through them real quick and then we can kind of dive in, especially I think for the first few stages in here. But it actually starts before you start, right? So the very first stage actually happens pre-launch. Now, because of the point I made earlier where there's no clear demarcation point, it can get hard to understand what the different stages are. So one of the things that I did in the book was I compare every stage to a position in a sports team. Now, you don't have to know a lot about sports for it to make sense. These are really simple. You don't have to, it's not single sport specific or anything like that. It just gives us a visual that we can kind of grab onto. So the very first one, it's called the dissatisfied employee. And you know this from working with founders. Every great founder story starts with a founder who's actually, they're actually doing all right a lot of the time. Not every time, but what happens is there's just this something inside of them that regardless of whether they're doing well or whether they're doing poorly, they know they need to do their thing. Now, sometimes we don't see that until we look in the rearview mirror. Some folks are very cognizant that they know that it's going on, but the point that you made, and this is a really important one, is that one of the biggest mistakes founders make right out of the gate is that they rush this stage, right? And sometimes it's due to life circumstances. Sometimes it's just that dissatisfaction is so uncomfortable that we jump right in before we ever find out what we don't know. Right? We skip this stage. I call it being the trainee on the sideline. There's this role that we can play in our own story of just actually sitting back and watching and learning and exposing ourselves to the world that we're about to step into. So stage one, dissatisfied employee, trainee on the sideline, and the demarcation point to get out of that stage or the point where you cross into stage two is usually when you go full time. And that's what I call the startup entrepreneur. There's no rocket science behind this. It's pretty straightforward. But being a startup entrepreneur, right, being the founder, actually hanging your shingle, and it doesn't matter if you're a solopreneur or you've got a vision of building, the next international firm. It all starts with the founder, and maybe a group. That doesn't really matter either. But what I liken it to is being a star player. Right? Being the star player on the field. When you look at what makes success, it's how good you are at what you do. Not just what you do, but how you sell what you do and how you market what you do and the skills that you as the founder take on. There are very few organizations that grow faster than their founder in this stage. It may feel like we're struggling to keep up, but what you really look at is that it's growing based on the skills of the founder, and that's good and it's appropriate for a time. And again, it's like being that star player on the field. Put the ball in my hands and let me run with it. And that works really well. And when it works really well, what happens? You get more employees, you get more customers, you get more complexity. You just get more of everything. All the dials turn up.
Right.
And for founders, we kind of wake up one day and there's this question that's kind of been in the back of our minds, and then something happens to bring it right up to the front. And that is, what's wrong with these people, right? The employees that we've hired, they don't think like us, they don't act like us, they don't do what we do. And what's happened is we've stepped into stage three. I call it the reluctant manager. Right. There's not a founder out there who says, I want to start my business so I can manage people. Right. That's just no one has ever said that. And so the reality of it is, though, when you get 5, 10, maybe up to 15 people around you, someone has to manage them. And you're not big enough and you don't know enough as a leader to know who a great manager is for them or how to manage that manager. And so there's this stage where you don't have to be the best manager in the world, but you can't just farm out management. You have to learn some of the basic skills of management, both so that you can hold a future manager accountable appropriately, so that you can equip them to succeed appropriately, and also because it lays a foundation for the leadership skills you're going to need in the future. And what makes this stage so hard is it's like being a captain on the field. You're still in the game. You still have your own responsibilities, but somehow you need to learn to lead all these other people at the same time. And so we're in this kind of reluctant manager. It's like, man, if they would just think right, if they would, why do they have to be managed, whatever it may be. And the reality of it is, some of that is true. It's possible to hire folks that need a management style from you that is not going to work, right? It's just flawed from the beginning. But there are other folks that you hire that are exactly what you need, but they need to be managed as well. Not micromanaged, but managed.
Right.
And so if we learn how to we learn how to manage them, again, just basic management skills. I'm not talking about being the world's best manager ever, but just basic management skills. You hit this another stage of growth, right? And usually the organization's doing phenomenal during this time. You're able to add more employees so you can grow by addition. And it's just, you'll see companies do double, triple, quadruple digit growth during this stage sometimes. And it's a whole lot of fun, but what's happening at each kind of increment where we add another person, we're kind of trimming down what the founder does. And while that's wonderful because it seemed like it would give us more freedom, what's actually happening is we're being more and more restricted by what we can do, and then all the time we saved is getting sucked back into solving the people problems and like being a babysitter. It's like I'm a full-time babysitter now. What's going on here? And what happens is the organization gets bigger, and we achieve the kind of mile markers of success that the world talks about when we break $1 million or break $10 million or whatever it may be. It depends on the industry. And then we get to the other side of it and realize this is the same thing. It's not any better. It's just bigger. And it's a lot of work, right? And we start seeing this trajectory of like, it's going to keep getting bigger. It's going to keep asking more of me. And there's only so much of me to go around. And in stage 4, we become, it's unfortunate to an extent, but it's not the end of the story. We become a disillusioned leader, right? These things that we thought were why we started the business, or the things that we thought would make us successful, or the things that we thought would be game changers, they don't really pan out to that. And we're kind of left, I call it the coach on the sideline. We're there, we're at the ground level, but we're watching the game happen. And sometimes we're watching it happen without us. And that's hard. Right, we're used to being that star player. We're used to be out there with the ball, and so it can be a really frustrating, really challenging season. And why it's so hard, especially for founders, is because from the outside it looks wonderful. Right, from the outside, your friends and family, even other businesses are like, "What are you complaining about? Like, you're running a multi-million-dollar business. What's wrong with you?" And it's not that there's something wrong with you. It's just that you're in this really difficult stage 4. So you coach on the sideline. You need to learn how to do that. You need to learn how to be able to lead without the ball in your hands, right? Be able to lead through other people. And at this stage, it's kind of like, Scott, this is kind of depressing, right? We talked about dissatisfied employees. I remember the startup entrepreneur phase, and it wasn't all that exciting. Now you're talking about reluctant managers and disillusioned leaders. Like, what's the deal? And the point of it, it's not all Debbie Downer, right? It's not like it's all a bad. There's a lot of joy that happens. Actually, there's a ton of joy that can happen in every one of these stages. But if we stop the script here, it's kind of like, have you ever watched a movie? Like, take your biggest, most epic movie and then stop watching it about 15 minutes before the end. It's downright depressing, right? Everything that can go wrong has gone wrong. There's betrayals and heartbreak and setback after setback. And that's where we are in the story. We're about 15 minutes from, the resolution, the denouement. And what a lot of founders do, because it's so hard, they're asking, is this really as good as it gets? Like, we've been getting bigger, it's not been getting better. And we stop here, right? We either just kind of stunt the organization's growth because we can't take it anymore, or many will leave, right? Or some will shrink back. Hey, I just want me and a couple of helpers and we're good to go. There's nothing inherently wrong with any of those things. If you choose it intentionally, that's wonderful. I think that's great. But there's more, right? Like, there is another chapter in the story, and that's where we move into we move into the 5th stage, which I call the chief executive. And what's so special about this? You've been using the title for a long time, don't get me wrong, but this is where we really get to step back into the visionary seat. It's one of those things. I get to see people through this transition from stage 4 to stage 5 all the time. And at the front of it, there's always this challenge of stage 5 is so much better that if I really told you what it was like, you wouldn't believe me. Right? It's hard to imagine that one step could create so much transformation in an individual and in their experience in their own company, but it can. And it's like, I liken it to being a GM in the box. It doesn't matter how hot it is or how much it's raining. When you're in the box, it's 75 and there's a full buffet. You get to and you've got a bird's eye view on the whole game. You can see every piece, and it's a really, really special stage. It's where you can start to scale your business and it's not ripping you apart, right? We scaled when I was in my early 20s and it almost killed me. My blood pressure was in the 150s on a good day when I was
Oh, wow.
27 years old, right? So it's like you can muscle your way through this, but when you get to stage 5 and you wait the appropriate amount of time to get to stage 5 and really scale, there's the scaling with like a grace and ease to it, which is really special. And we'll round out these last two real quickly. So the last two are becoming an owner, right? You hear all this stuff, own and not run, own and not run. And the reality of it is that to really own a company, you want to get through the first 5 stages first, because it creates skill and understanding inside you as a founder. It creates the capacity and structure inside your organization that not only allows it to give you a great paycheck, right, or a great payout if you sell, but you've created an organization that can live on without you, that can actually continue to grow even when you're gone. And that's the real joy of being a true owner is, yes, the payday's great. Yes, the time freedom is wonderful, but it's seeing what you've built continue to flourish without needing anything from you. It's a really, really special time. And then last but not least is what I call the visionary founder. And it's kind of like the hall of fame of the business or nonprofit world. It's where you're not needed for day-to-day operations anymore. Most folks have all the financial freedom that they want. They actually have all the time freedom that they want. And they actually, in achieving all those freedoms, recognize that the one thing they want to do is actually give back. They want to pour into other founders and entrepreneurs. They want to change the way the game is played altogether. They want to give back to society. And it's a really, really beautiful thing.
Well, and I know as I'm listening to you talk, everyone wants to get to that visionary stage, but I can think of, some examples where people sometimes I think are reluctant to give up kind of that, like, I'm the company kind of thing too. I'm the face of the company, right? They have to come to me, like they're not going to feel as needed maybe, and so I know that's just one challenge. I would love for you maybe to just talk about a few of those challenges that as business owners we need to overcome so we can continue moving to those stages where it's easier.
It's 100% true. So there's 3 big pain points. There's 3 big inflection points. There's 3 big adaptations or evolutions we need to make. First one is what I call the star player paradox. So this shows up pretty early on, and it's the better you are at whatever it is you do, the harder it is to manage other people to do the same thing. Right? The better you are as a star player, the harder it is to become captain on the field. And there's 1,000 reasons for that, but it goes to that heart of like, no one can do it as well as I can. Right. And what you've got to realize is that if you're going to progress, you can stay a star player for as long as you want. And some people will consciously choose to just stay there. And that's wonderful. I'm in that mode right now. Right. I've been in later stages and realized I want to go back to being a player on the field again. And so you can stay there indefinitely. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And in fact, it's incredibly noble to recognize that's your A seat. But if you want to move on, right, if you want to get to visionary founder stage, or you even want to just get to the CEO stage, you've got to let go of that. It's not about how fast you are. It's about how fast you can help others run. And so that's the first one. And it's a challenge. The better you are at stage 2, the harder it is to get to stage 3. Another big one that you talked about is that the business needs me. The business is me. And so the defining question of stage 5, chief executive, the thing that you got to wrestle to the ground if you're going to get there is, who am I? If I'm not the business, if the business is separate from me, who am I and what is it? And from the outside in, that doesn't seem like it would be that big a challenge. But you ask anybody in that seat, it's an existential challenge for founders. They are so knit into the fabric of their organization, and it is so knit into them that it's a little like doing heart surgery sometimes to get those 2 things separate. Now, on the other end of it is all the joy I talked about for getting into that stage and then being able to become an owner. And there's so much freedom that comes from it. But it requires you to really do not just some, business tactics, but some actual soul searching as you're progressing through.
I think it's really important to really look at that too, because a lot of times too, people will say, well, I want to delegate, but it's just going to take too long to train somebody, right? I'll just do it myself. But if you continue just doing it yourself, you're never going to get out of doing the
Yeah.
day-to-day work, and you're never going to become that visionary. So we have to, even in ourselves, overcome those challenges that are preventing us from taking those steps. And I think sometimes it might be even a fear of what's out there. It's better to do what you know than to
Yeah.
say like, oh, well, I don't know what the future is going to bring.
Hmm.
And so I think just as the founders ourselves, we really have to deal with our own, fears and thoughts and concerns and,
Yeah.
be able to let go, because we're also helping others grow in their own capacities as well, which really, if we can focus on our employees and giving them the opportunities to continue growing too, our staff's going to stay around too, because they feel valuable and they don't have to look for something somewhere else, which is going to
Yeah.
help our company.
Yeah.
Right. So,
That's
um,
so true. There's so much
mhm,
benefit from it. And I think the other thing to realize is it's why these stages are so important. Because if you're in
mhm,
star player mode and you can succeed in star player mode, you don't have to figure out how to delegate. You just need to do the work better, right? Become more efficient
mhm,
and do it. But if you're saying, hey, I want to get here, right? And if you want to get up and to the right, you have to make some changes. When you get 5-10 employees around, then the ratio shifts, right? It actually becomes
mhm,
a drag on your organization to do it yourself, and that
mhm,
it's so helpful for folks. It's so liberating to say, hey, it's not that you had to delegate this from day one. It's that you're not just saying no to something, you're saying yes to something greater.
mhm,
And founders, if you try and restrict their world, you have to say no, you have to say no, they're going to resist that. It's just a visceral reaction. But if you say, hey, by letting go of this, by delegating it, by investing your time and energy into getting someone else up to speed, it's going to create the space for you to do this. And
mhm.
that's where we really find the freedom to overcome those fears, not to get away from something, but move to a vision of something better.
Right. And I think a lot of people, when they start their companies, have that vision of someday I'm going to sell, right? So I'm building this company so that it's like my retirement plan or something. So if you're going to be able to do that and get out of the company, you have to prepare your company now. It's going to take time, to get everything in place.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what would you, say to a founder who has this plan? Like, yes, someday I'm going to sell, or I'm going to give it to my family, or I'm going to, whatever. But they're also in that, like, holding on to everything right now because, again, maybe they don't know how to even delegate or do all those things. But what would you say to someone who has
Yeah.
that plan, but they don't know how to get there?
Yeah. I would say, one, let's just be honest, you can sell at any time, right?
Mhm,
As long as you've built some degree of success, you can sell at any time. What we're not talking about whether you can sell or not. We're talking about two things. Will the organization survive the sale? Right?
mm,
Because you could
mhm,
sell and they'll just get your client list and leave everything else behind. Or you can sell and they'll get your assets and then everything else disappears. So what we're really talking about is not whether or not you can sell. We're talking about, have you built a legacy that can outlast your time at the company? That's
mhm,
a really big motivating factor, because if I'm doing this just so I can get just so that I can sell, but intuitively I know I could probably sell anyway, that's not very motivating for a founder. So that's the
mhm,
first one, is we're really talking about the vitality of the organization moving forward. And now, to make that, it's not just all virtue. The second aspect of it is, if the organization will survive and be valuable after you're gone, whoever's buying it, it's worth 5 and 6 times more than it is if it's just asset value. And
mhm,
so not only are you leaving a legacy inside the organization, you're also leaving a legacy to your children or your heirs or beneficiaries, whomever it is. And that payday is not just about you. Most founders at
mhm.
this stage could sell the thing. They don't need another zero on the deal, right? Like, they don't need
Right.
it. It's not, it's not going to change their lifestyle, but it will change someone else's lifestyle. And when we can
Mhm,
start to get a vision for what we can do with that money, it's not just cashing out. It's not just proof that we did the right things in the past. It's a stepping stone for us to step into that stage as true owner or as visionary founder and have the resources behind it. That's what makes it really special. That's what makes it worth doing now, even though we don't feel like it.
mhm. And is there anything else that you want to share on this topic that maybe I didn't know to ask that would help our listeners?
So one of the problems that we can have with a model like this is it can kind of be abstract. It's like, yeah, Scott, I get it, but like, what do I do with it? And so one of the things that we have is we put it all in a book that we've intentionally made free for everyone, right? It's a passion project for me. We go through all the 7 stages. That's fine. But the big draw here is that in each stage, there's just 2 or 3 things that you have to do. There are so many things that people will say you should be doing this. There are so many things that you feel like you should be doing, whether it's hanging on to stuff too long or letting go of stuff too soon or doing this or doing that. There's so many things that you might feel like you have to do. But the reality of it is there's only a couple that you really need to do. And when you can recognize, hey, this is the stage I'm in, these are 2 or 3 things I have to do, the really cool part about it, that means there's 20 or 30 things you don't need to be doing right now. And so what I've found is anyone who goes in, reads the book, finds a stage, and really sets themselves to like, hey, I'm going to do these 2 or 3 things, they get to let go of so much. Average person saving 10 hours a week from the first week.
Wow, that's great. Right? Who wouldn't want that?
Yeah, sounds too good to be true, but it really is. By dialing in and running with it, it can be a lot of fun.
Perfect. Well, you did mention having that free resource. I'd love for you to share like how people can find that resource that you have for them. And also if they have more questions, if they want to connect with you, how can they find you?
That's a great question. So the book is available at scalearchitects.com/founders. Nice and easy, scalearchitects.com/founders. And that's going to get you a free copy of the book. You get to go through all 7 stages and the essential strategies for each one. It also has an option right there on the page to schedule a time with me. You can get a free 30-minute spot. And again, the big thing there is let's find the things that you don't need to be working on. Let's find the couple things you do need to be working on so you can both enjoy the stage that you're in and rapidly accelerate toward the next one.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Scott, for being a guest on my show and talking about this topic. I found it very interesting. I'm sure our listeners will too. And so thank you so much.
Thanks, Candy. I appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guest and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help For You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.